Georg William, German, Georg Wilhelm, also known as George IV William, Polish, Jerzy IV Wilhelm, September 29, 1660 to November 21, 1675, was the last Silesian Duke of Legnica and Brzeg from 1672 until his death. He was the last male member of the Silesian Piast dynasty descending from Władysław II the Exile, 1105 to 1159. Georg William was the eldest but only surviving son of Duke Christian of Legnica and Brzeg, 1618 to 1672, by his wife Louise, 1631 to 1680, a daughter of the Ascanian Prince John Casimir of Anhalt-Dessau. He had three siblings. Carolina of Liegnitz and Brzeg, 1652 to 1707, last Silesian Piast Duchess, married to Frederick, Duke of Schleswig-Holstein-Sonderburg-Wiesenberg, 1651 to 1724, in 1672. Louise, 1657 to 1660. Christian Louis, 1664 to 1664. As the only surviving son, Georg William was the sole heir to his father's possessions. Duke Christian of Legnica and Brzeg had spent many years in exile in Poland and in the Duchy of Prussia during the 30 Years' War, after Georg William's grandfather Duke John Christian of Brzeg had fallen out of favor with the Habsburg Emperor Ferdinand II. Duke Christian became sole ruler over the Silesian duchies of Legnica and Brzeg in 1664. After the abdication of King John II Casimir Wasa of Poland in 1668, he even put forward his candidacy for the Polish throne. To win the affection and support of the old nobility, he initially wanted to give his newborn son an old Piast name, like Mieszko or Bolesław. However, the Calvinist clergy of his duchy opposed this, maintaining that the idea could bring the return to paganism over Poland. The Duke, however, saw to it that his son spoke Polish and wore Polish clothes. The deaths at 1663 and 1664 of his paternal uncles Duke George III of Brzeg and Duke Louis IV of Legnica without surviving issue left him as the only heir of his father in the still vast duchy of Legnica and Brzeg. As a result, since his early years, Georg William received a careful education. During his upbringing, he was put in the hands of the Anhalt-Bernburg Count Marshal August Friedrich Bunny and the personal Dr. Henry Martini. During this first period of his education, he acquired an excellent knowledge of German, French, and Latin, also understood Italian, Spanish, and Polish. He was also educated in theology, philosophy, and rhetoric. After his father's death in 1672, the then 12-year-old Georg William succeeded him as Duke of Legnica and Brzeg. During his minority, the regency was exercised by his mother, Dowager Duchess Louise, who held the towns of Woolau and Olsztyn as her dower, with him. Fearing claims raised by the Habsburg Emperor Leopold I in his capacity as ruler over the crown of Bohemia, Duke Christian had devised by will that his son was formally under the tutelage of his maternal uncle Prince John George II of Anhalt-Dessau and the mighty Hohenzollern-Elector Frederick William of Brandenburg. The day before his father's death, Louise sent her son to study at the Viadrina University in Brandenburg in Frankfurt/Oder, considered as an act of mistrust by the imperial court. On the other hand, the regency of the Dowager Duchess faced the opposition of the Protestant estates of Legnica and Brzeg. Thanks to her increasingly open support for the Catholic faith, a major scandal occurred when the young duke's sister Carolina secretly married Frederick, a member of the aristocrat Catholic family of Schleswig-Holstein-Sonderburg-Wiesenberg. The Brandenburg elector reached an understanding with the Habsburg Emperor, and in 1673 Georg William returned to Brzeg, where he received the homage by the estates. On March 14, 1675, the young duke could take formal possession of the government of his lands after he went to the imperial court in Vienna, making his solemn homage to Emperor Leopold I, who confirmed his coming of age in the succession to his father's lands. Immediately after the beginning of Georg William's rule, Duchess Louise was forced to give up her area of Woolau. The announcements of the start of a good and prosperous government by Georg William were stopped with the sudden death of the duke on November 21, 1675. The cause of his death was an intense fever, developed shortly after his return from a hunt, the first sign of smallpox. The duke was buried in the church of St. John in Legnica, alongside his father, where his grieved mother had a mausoleum built. Upon his death, the Duchy of Legnica and Brzeg reverted to Emperor Leopold as ruler over the Bohemian crown lands, which since 1526 were integral part of the Austrian Habsburg monarchy. Leopold took up the government by a Landeshauptmann deputy, despite the claims of Georg William's morganatic uncle Count August of Legnica, and had several counter-reformation measures implemented. Duchess Louise retained her lands of Valois until her death in 1680, when they were also incorporated into the Bohemian lands. The independent Masovian Piasts had died out in 1526, while the Teschen line had become extinct in 1653. Georg William was therefore the last ruling member of all the Piast dynasty, which finally became extinct with the death of his only surviving sibling, Carolina, in 1707. The term Piast dynasty was first used by the Polish historian Adam Narasiewicz in his book's History of Poland, which he started in 1779. On Georg William's burial crypt a text was carved referring to him as the last of the Piast dukes of Silesia, who are since the 17th century referred to as Silesian Piasts.